Hi, welcome to the 9th video of C# fundamental tutorial. Before you proceed with the 9th video, I would advise you to go and watch videos 1 to 8 before joining the 9. Okay? Okay. Before we proceed, I might just want to tell you what we've covered so far. We've talked about variables, data types, subroutine, conditional statement, iteration, collection, and we're still on classes. Still on classes generally. We've done a lot on classes. I'll open that. We've talked about what a class was, and we've talked about the constructor timeline down to constants. So, but now we're about to do the real job. We're about to write a class and create some constructors, destructors, properties, and etc. down to constant. But what we've done before was I tend to bring you into the debugging life in order for you to understand in terms of troubleshooting when you have problems in the future, how to solve them. So we talked about printing debugging with a log file, and we equally talk about tool debugging with Visual Studio. So, but if you want to know much more about the debugging, I will advise you to go watch video 8. That's where we had all of this done. Okay, and then let's proceed right now. I'll teach you how to write a class and a constructor. But first, let's just flip over to the other side. Understanding C# constructors, which is very important. Constructors are found in classes, mainly used to instantiate a class. That's what a constructor is. Constructors are like methods, but special in their own way. Okay, and then constructor can never return anything. Okay, not like we've written methods that returns either a string, an object, something, a value. So where you see other methods returning value, constructors do not do that. Okay, you see that in action in short. And then constructor can be overloaded in a class with the same name only if the signature is carrying a parameter or parameters. Okay, so you see that equally in action. I'll demonstrate that later. Constructor can call other constructors within the same class. I'll show you how to do that as well. That's quite simple. And then constructors are mainly wrapped in a class. Obvious. Where do you see constructors? Constructors are always in a class. You see them inside a class. That's where they are. That's where they belong. And a perfect example of a class and constructor will look like this. Now, where you see, I'm having a class called public class parents, and I'm having a default constructor defined or declared in between public parents. That's how a constructor looks. There is nothing in front of it, no type like void or string or integer. It never returns anything, and has a curly bracket as well, which curly brackets open tag and curly brackets close tag. That's what a constructor is. A constructor is. Okay, that was a long talk. So now let's go write some codes. So first I'm going to create a class, which I want to show you. We've been doing classes all this while. So classes, we've been writing classes all this while, but just that maybe you didn't take note. Most of the stuff we did are classes, so you've met classes before. Let me give you a proper example. That will be the C# collection, for example. This is a class, so class is not new for you. Okay, we've written class in so many ways. So that's a class, and all of this, all of them here are classes. So it's not new. So now let's just go down to the main issue. The main issue here now is to create a class with a constructor. Okay. Before I dig into that, I'll show you what I want to do. I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to create a default constructor for it, and then do what we call the overload constructor as well, and try to wrap that up in my console. Let's go try that. First of all, I'm going to add a folder called family. Okay, so in that family, I'm going to create a class called parents, or parent. Okay, add it to it, and make that public. Clean out every other sort of garbage that I don't want, and then save it. Now that is a class. It's just an empty class. We've been doing that all the time. Take note of that. If you can go to all past projects, and you can as well see them here. These are classes, so that is nothing new to you. You've seen that before. Now that I've created a class, let me see. Now that I've created a class, I need to create a default constructor for it. Now this is a constructor. When there's a special shorthand for this. You can use a shorthand to create your constructor, or you just write it directly. And constructors sometimes public or protected, depends on the class, if it's abstract or whatever. So we'll talk about that. We'll come into that later. But for now, we are just concentrating on constructor in the class. So oh, I wrote that wrong. Parent, this is wrong. This is supposed to be parents. I'm going to rename that. Sorry about that. So I'm changing that because I just misspelled myself. So now I'm going to create a constructor for parents. You can mainly do this way: public parents, close tag, and with the curly brackets in between. Now this is nothing but a default constructor. Okay, this is basically a default constructor. Okay, now in other words, each time you try to instantiate a parent class, instantiate a class, sorry, it's the first thing it does, it creates the class through the constructor. It comes to the constructor at first before you do anything like that. It has to build itself. So to build an object, it instantiates it through the constructor. It comes to the constructor and said, yes, I am here. Now it's time to build you or make an object out of that class. Now a perfect example of that will look like this. Let me copy that. I have some lines of code written already. I'll just put that and bring the using that I need for it. I said first instantiate parents default constructor, and I put something below. And now I will now initialize this class in my program so I can use it generally. So if I say parent class is parents is equals to new parent. So this we've done before. It's not new. You've seen it here. You've seen it almost everywhere. So it's just the same thing, but the main goal here is to explain to you more about constructor. So now what it does here, now it says new parent. When I tend to click here and go, you see it comes straight to the parents constructor. That means it starts here. This is where each and every object that is built out of a class jumps into the default constructor at first. It doesn't matter. It depends on what constructor you call, but it needs a constructor to go in to build or to get an object or to create an object out of it. So when we run this, I'm going to show you very short and simple. I think mostly you can go in through F12 if you press F12, but in my case it's configured with ReSharper, so it depends on what you do. So but I'll still click here. If you come here and you just put your breakpoint here, and then go back to program, set your breakpoint here again, and now let's try to step into to see where it goes when you instantiate a new parent. So let's see. Okay, now it's that, and then now I'm going to step into and then see where it goes. Look at that, it comes into the parent, into the parent default constructor. So I'll just step through, it goes in, like that, steps out, and then brilliant. I'll let that run. See, first instantiate parents default constructor. Did that quite simple. Okay, let me actually put a line at the top because this is just too. I put an empty line here, and then remove all the breakpoints. I've shown you that before in the last video. I'll run that again. Okay, I have a blank space at the top. That's what I wanted, because it's just too it's too at the edge of at the tip of the console, so it's disturbing me. So first, instantiate parent default constructor. All right, and let's see what's left there. Now I'm going to do some kind of like overload constructor. You see that in action when I go to the class. Now let's do some overload constructor. Now this is the default constructor. Let's do a constructor that that takes a parameter with the parent, with the father, for example. So now, sorry, did I mention I want to show you the shorthand on how to create a constructor without typing the full public? Here you can just say CTOR and then you press tab. Now it jumps and it creates a constructor. Now look at that. It's going to give us, no matter what I do, I'll get a compiler error here. You know why? Because it says type parents already defines, sorry, let me put my mouse there. Type parent already defines a member called in the constructor. So member with the same signature is already declared. So there is no way you can have the same constructor with the same name with the same art of signature. So signature means what it does. So it must be unique. Constructor must be unique in the class. So in this case, and the only thing why am I doing this next constructor? Because I want a parameter here. I want to give a parameter here. So I say string and I say father. Now I want to be able to create the parent this parent class with the father's constructor. Okay, in this case, to keep things simple again, I've written some lines of code here so I don't write them again. I just paste them here. So let's assume now I want to use that constructor and not that one. So I can just go ahead and use this one. So that means I am ignoring that one. So you see what's going to happen if I go in here. Now you see it tells me here that I'm using the default constructor, but in this case I want to use the constructor with the father, the one that gives that takes a parameter of father. I'll just type in here, put it quickly short as a string. I say father. Now I'll put in word father. You know what? I'm going to put a real name there. I'll say David. Actually James. Okay, let me say James. Now the father is James. And then let's see what happens if I run this. It's going to create the second constructor. Look at that. Instantiate constructor with James as parameter. So let me close that. Let's actually debug this and see how it runs. So I'm going to use the F11 key. I jump in here. You see it comes to the second constructor. There are two constructors here. The first one and the second one. What it does now, it comes to the second constructor with the name father, with the father James. So instantiate constructor with James as parameter. So I'm going to go in here. So what is stored in the variable is James, and then I will write it down there. Write it in my console. Press F5. Let it run. Second instantiate constructor with James as parameter. Okay. Okay. Fine. Now there will be some kind, this is a type of overload. Now we're overloading the constructor. We're creating more constructors for more kind of more art, to instantiate it in a different art. So but what happens if I want the default to be done first? So I want all constructors to be read. So that means I want it to be unique. So I'll just go in here and say, okay, I will overload this by saying semicolon, no, sorry, yeah, 2 dots, and then I will say this. So and I close it. So now that is that means this. When I say this means the first constructor. This means the default constructor. So it's not like I'm just saying parent here. Like that. Let me copy that properly. It's not like I'm saying that here because it's not recognized. It's never going to work. Okay. It never works like that. So all you need to do is say this means that class, okay? This means I'm talking about this class generally, and each class has a default constructor. So, and then when I put that there, he knows that I'm talking about that constructor without parameters inside it, okay? So now let's see how it's going to do. Now we're calling this constructor in program here. We're calling it here. Now you will discover that when we call it, the first constructor that is created, that has to be instantiated at the very first site, will be the parent, and then later will be the first constructor, which is default, which is parent default, and then the overload constructor parent with father as parameter. So I'm going to put a breakpoint on both parts so we see that in action. So go back here. You see I'm calling the second constructor, which is that one. So let's go put a breakpoint here too. Yeah, it's there. I run this. Now it stops. I'm going to use F11 to jump into it. I go inside, and then look at that. The first thing it does, it comes to that one. So now, as it's coming to that one with the parameter, it's going to go straight here to this, which happens to be parent default constructor, to run that code, and before coming back to this one. So watch it out for the action. You see? Now that's what I mean. So it's creating that one, goes out, comes back here. Now we're back here, and then finalize its job at the last constructor. Look at it. It says first constructor as a first instantiate parent default constructor, second instantiate constructor with James as parameter. Okay. All right. What happens when we tend to overload this with the third constructor? That means we're doing something like this. A constructor with string as father, and now we can't have this type of constructor anymore because we've created something like that. So it's going to give us compile error. So we need something unique, something that differentiates this one from that one and that one. So in this case, we need something like we're going for mother. We're adding the mother parameter here. So to speed things up, I have a code for that again that will read that into the console. I'll paste it here. So you see, I'm taking mother and father. Now I'll go back there. What I want to do now is I'll go back to program and tend to do this one. I'll put a breakpoint here and tend to do this the third constructor with the father and mother as parameter. Let's go do that. So I'm going to add mother here. I'll call her mother. So now you assume that you might be confused. You might be thinking that at the end of the day it's going to do that one and then get here. No, it's not going to do that one. What it's going to do right now is going to do that one because we don't call any of the base constructor at the top. There is no overload yet. We're not calling anyone at the top. So let's run this. Press F11. I'm in here. You see, I created father, mother. Now it's created. You see, now it tells me that the third instantiate constructor with James and Martha as parameter. Okay. Now let's now say, you know what? Actually, we want you to create all constructor. Go through all of them. Do that one and do that one, and then before you finalize here. So we just say same thing base. I just say I say this, and I choose which one. Now you look at that. The ones that are free is that one and the default one without no parameters at the top. Look at that one, no parameters, and there's another one called father with parameters. Like you see now, what is expecting? What I want to give him now, I'm going to give him this father to be taken to this constructor. So the father will appear here because I'm passing it to him. So let me put father that comes from here. I'll pass it through that through here as a value. So let's run this now. You see that it's going to create that one and then later create that one and finalize it here. So we'll run it. Okay, and I'll go in with F11, and then look at that. I'm in here. It says father is going to go create that one first, and then initialize the other one, and finally come here. So let's go first the top one, and then jump back to here and create the second one, and then finalizes that here. If you see father is father James, and father James. James is equally here. It's been taken here too. So James is going to be here as well on the second parent constructor. I'll let that run. Look at that. We created all three constructors, meaning that an object has been created and the object is unique. So definitely we have the first instantiate parents default constructor, second instantiate constructor with James as parameter, and then third instantiate constructor with James and Martha as parameter. Okay? Alright, brilliant. That sounds good. Okay, what we've done so far, we've created a class, we've created default constructors, and we had to create some overload constructors, which we did previously. And you saw it created the first, second, and third constructors. Okay, what we're about to do now is I'll show you quite. Is we've created that one, and now we're about to talk about the structures and property. I'm going to join those two together because I think I'm going to need them. I'm going to need a property to help you understand the structure even more. So and let me just bring that down. I'll add that here. This is for this structure, and then I'll add this here too. I'll say property. Okay, we'll talk about that now. But before we do that, let me explain what a properties is in details. Okay. All right. We just finished talking about the constructor. Let's flip over to C# properties. First of all, with properties or with property, you can with property you are allowed to control the accessibility of the class variables. Okay. I'll take that again. With property, you are allowed to control the accessibility of the class variables. Okay. And then a property is more like a combination of variable and a method wrapped to be one. Okay. In terms of that, a property consists of two parts, namely getter and a setter method. Okay. The getter, otherwise known as get, is the get returns the variable. It's the type that returns the variable. It gives the variable back. All it does is just give back. It doesn't set. It doesn't take anything, but it just gives back. And then we have the setter, otherwise known as set. The set assigns the variable. All it does, it assigns a value to your variables. So a perfect example of a property will look like that. That's exactly how it is. That is property. We've been dealing with we may have been dealing with properties all this while, and from the onset when we started the whole process, but maybe you never took note, but it's all in there. But now is the right time to explain how to use it and why, the reasons why they're there. So where a perfect example of that will look like this, where you have the private string father, public string father, and then the getter that I said is that one, returns father, which is the variable that we declared formally at the top, and then setter is father is equals to value. So every property has a value in between that you use to set the local variable inside it. Now there's another special way to do this. This is a kind of like overload. There's a special way to do it when you want the shorthand of a property will look differently, when you don't have the private string father at the top, that everything goes with getter and setter. I'll show you that in code. That will lead us to another level of going back to code, so I can now at least write some codes for you to see that in action. So let's go see what develops. Now, this is a property. There's another special way to write a property. When you want to write it in full, you say PROP, and then you put full, and then you press tab. It gives you everything together combined. In this case, I want a string type, and here as well. And I want this to be a local variable where I say father. So that is my father. That is the father local variable which I created. Let me do that properly. I just missed that. And then I do the main one. So look at that. That's exactly what I explained. The getter returns the father variable, and the setter assigns to the father variables. Okay. So let me use that. I'll put a breakpoint here on the setter, and I'll put a breakpoint at the getter. So this is a kind of like method. Let me try to assign right here the father that comes in the parents here to it. And close that. Sorry. So when I run that, you will see that you will see that it will definitely get here. Let me take every other ones out and leave just that one. Breakpoints out and leave just those two. Run this. Go through it. Look. Now, at the initial stage is null. There is nothing. The property itself, it's null. And then now it's going to, now that James is coming in, I will assign James to father. Look what happens. It jumps straight to the setter method. And the value here is James. And it's about assign that to father, which is the local variable, which happens to be null. It's going to do that now. Assign it to it. Now it has been assigned. Then it's going to return it. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. Now, what happens if we want whatever that's been assigned to father on this part So now, if it has been assigned, we want it back. I can say string father is equals to parents dot father. So now we're talking about the accessibility of it. But I'll show you that in action in the nearest future. But we can't talk about that now. Accessibility means here. But I'll let that be for now, so we can go deeper a little bit, so we can discuss that later. So now let me run this, and so you can see the getter method as well in action. So I'm going to go back here and take the setter method variable out, breakpoints out, and so you can see how it gets the information back. All right, when I assign father and try to get it back, I'll run that. I'll let that run. Sets, goes out. I'm back here. Now I'm going to take the information from James and set it here. Look what happens. It comes here straight. So get father, which is assigned with James. Get it back and assign it to my local variable here. Yes, no. See that? Brilliant. Does it fine. Nice and simple. Okay. Now that is nothing but property. Okay. And the properties can be public. They can be protected, but that has to do with the visibility state, which I said I will discuss in short, which happens to be here. We'll talk about that in a later video. All right, so I think we've made it. Now I'll see you in the next video, which happens to be the video 10, I guess, and there we're going to be talking more about the destructor, and then including other stuff that I've not mentioned before. So see you on my next video.